You are listening to X Wing Radio.
Welcome back, you rebel scum. I'm David, that's Wesley, and you just tuned in to X Wing Radio, your weekly broadcast from a galaxy far, far away.
Today, we are going to be picking up where we left off a month ago and discussing the second book in the Thrawn Trilogy, Dark Force Rising. All right, David,
Got
what
it
do
right here.
you have to say for yourself?
Well, first of all,
Yeah,
I do want to point out that this episode is coming out the week of Halloween, and you're not in costume.
Deadpool.
Oh, okay. But remember, we already decided who we're going to dress up as. So, in being a man of my word, Grogu. For those of you listening, I just put on a name tag that says Grogu.
That's my bad. I don't have either a name tag or an outfit that resembles Ahsoka Tano, so I'm sorry. Um, we might have a crop top or a shirt that's small enough to look like a crop top on me laying around somewhere. But again, I don't think anyone really wants to see that. So, um,
Yeah, probably not.
David, I don't know if I actually said that I would come dressed next time, or as in this time, as my outfit. But if I did, then I am not a man of my word, and you can hold me to that.
Yep. Yep.
You have my
Anyway,
word on that as a Spaniard.
anyway, yes. So, yes, as Wesley just mentioned, as you just mentioned, Wesley. Um, Today we are talking about Dark Force Rising.
David, so I wanna discuss this real quick with you. A sidebar. Okay. Are you expecting us to read this verbatim?
Um, Not particularly. I just did that to kind of keep us more on track because, um, I'm not going to take this out. So for those of y'all listening, what Wesley's referring to is the outline that I sent him. And full disclosure, it was generated by AI. So just keep us on
We
track.
are
But
very busy people. AI is very helpful for us.
yeah. So I did skim through it. I don't know if there are any mistakes in this, but I guess if we do read through it, we will find that out.
And that adds to the fun and the adventure. Um, so where do you want to start? Do you want to start off with some thoughts on the book, or do you want to start off with just jumping right into what this has here as far as like the storyline? More or
Well,
less.
let's start off with our thoughts on the book, and then we'll circle back around to our thoughts at the end, just to kind of come full circle,
All right.
round it out.
Right.
So
Go for it.
well, I was gonna ask you what your thoughts are on the episode, but I
Boom! I
guess I'll
got you
go
before
first.
there. I got there before you. I beat you to it.
If you die before someone else, does that mean you've beaten them to death?
I'm probably going to try and beat you to death.
Yeah, but in all honesty,
I have a really bad joke. I'm not gonna say it. David, what are your
by
thoughts on
that
this
by
book?
okay, I'm not gonna go off on that tangent. I could go off on that tangent
We don't
really
need to go
really
off on
far,
that
but
tangent.
we just started. We need to actually stay on topic
Right.
for now.
We don't.
Oh.
So, what are your thoughts, David, on Dark Force Rising?
Um, I like the book. It was definitely I don't know. It was very similar. Obviously, it was written by Timothy Zahn, and probably around the same time as Heir to the Empire, so saying it's and it's the sequel to Heir to the Empire, so saying it's very similar is kind of redundant. But um, I did really like it. I think it was a good continuation um of Heir to the Empire. There were definitely a few other instances where it kind of showed its age as being prequels.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but if you keep that in mind when you're reading it, that when these were written, the only thing that existed Star Wars wise was the original trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
and technically
And
the
obviously the holiday special, which is everyone's favorite.
yeah, I was about to say, and technically the movies that we're not going to mention, the holiday special and the Ewok movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's beside the point. It does show its age in some of the things it talks about because, as it well, spoilers, but I'm just gonna put that out there for the whole episode. We're gonna get into some of the story later on, so spoilers. Go read the book and come back. If you haven't read Heir to the Empire, go read that first, and then read Dark Force Rising, and then come back. So, um,
And while you're at it, go ahead and read. I don't remember what the last name is of the book, but go ahead and
Last
read that one
Command.
too. Last
Last
Command. Go
Command.
ahead and read Last Command too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
We'll
we're
talk about
talking
that
about the
next
next.
month.
Yep, we're talking about that next month.
Beat you to it
Anyway,
again.
so yeah, it does get into some cloning stuff. Obviously, they mention or obviously Obi-Wan mentions the Clone Wars in A New Hope. We had no idea what that was.
Yeah.
Timothy Zahn
Yeah.
had no idea what that was. He was working off of just the single sentence Obi-Wan said in A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of that comes back to um the obviously we mentioned last time with Drew Sabaoth being a clone. And this was of course pre-existed the canon in Star Wars that force sensitive beings were really hard to clone because
Yeah.
reading the basically the premise he gives for the Clone Wars was that they probably did clone regular soldiers too, but they cloned a bunch of Jedi to fight in the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, an interesting
Um.
thing about the Clone Wars too in this is it was Clone Wars in this canon was the Old Republic fighting the Empire. The
Mm-hmm.
Old Republic didn't become the Empire in this canon.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. One thing. And you kind of touched on this. One thing that like my thoughts on the book specifically are like if you're reading through it and you put down Heir to the Empire and you pick up Dark Force Rising, it does not skip a beat. Like you are like you feel like you're reading the same book. Like I mean, obviously like you said, written by the same person, probably published within a relatively same amount of time, probably written around the same time. But the point being is like the and I'm assuming if you as we get into Last Command, it's all going to feel the same with this too. But it's like it's very well thought out. Like the planning of this
It's
book has been well thought out. It's all like everything meshes very well. All three books mesh very well together. I know it's a
mm,
trilogy, but it was done very well. And this book just shows that because like, it's just a tack on to the back
mm,
of
because
the last book.
you get some book series like Harry Potter where it's you know each book is a brand new story and you know but this trilogy is very much in the same vein as Lord of the Rings where it's
Hmm.
really one book that's split into three parts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Obviously it's not as long as Lord of the Rings, but it's that still that same, because it's
Mhm.
literally like uh, Dark Force
It's one
Rising picked
story.
up. Yeah, Dark Force Rising picked up exactly where Heir to the Empire left off, and I'm assuming Last Command is going to pick up exactly where Dark Force Rising left off.
Mhm. It's basically just, going from one chapter to the next. Like that's all
Mm,
that happens between books. And within listening to it, like that's exactly how it felt. Right when you pick up the next one. So,
mm,
again, like you said, I'm expecting the same thing from Last Command, but as a general overview, the books are very well done. The storyline is really, really well thought out. Obviously, it kind of has to be within the thought process of Thrawn being the villain and how calculating he is. Your first main point in this outline talks about Thrawn's master plan. Thrawn Thrawn isn't just doing things willy nilly throughout these books. He is climaxing to this point that he is going to weaken the Republic or the New Republic, do something. He has this grand plan that he's working towards throughout all of this. And so, Timothy Zahn couldn't have gone into this. If he did a really good job of doing it, but he couldn't have gone into this with a half of an idea in the first book, half of an idea in the second book, and then finally finished it all together, tying loose ends up in the third. He had to go into it with a huge plan of
mm,
what Thrawn was going to do, because Thrawn's not sloppy. So when you're writing a character like Thrawn, you have to make sure that you're not writing him in a sloppy way, and he hasn't done that so far. Thrawn has been uh impeccable was the word that came to mind, but he's been spot on. He's been portrayed very good in this book. Like all the characters we mentioned it last time, Timothy Zahn greatly captured the essence of Han, Luke, and Leia. Um, even Chewbacca. But anyways, uh,
mm,
he captures the essence of the characters very well and portrays them very well in this book. And obviously, for that, you have to have a lot of planning behind it, specifically for Thrawn.
mm. Now, once again, kind of moving more into the storyline here. Once again, there were kind of like three different plot lines kind of moving throughout the story. So obviously
Mm-hmm.
we follow once again we follow the Imperials with Captain Pelion and Thrawn.
Mm-hmm.
Follow Luke. Uh Lando and Han kind of stick together through most of this book. So we follow them, follow Leia, and we also follow Mara Jade and Talon Card.
Mm-hmm. So
And they
multiple
kind of
different plots.
they kind of fall, yeah, they kind of fall in and out of multiple different plots, but actually Card is kind of the driving force behind the plot of this book.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we get too far into that, I do want to mention one thing that I noticed within the last book, and then one thing I noticed within this book. It's all one big overarching story. And so there's going to be plot threads that are going to carry over from one book to the next. But what I like to see from this is within the first book, we saw it, how all the different plot points of all the characters we were following, more or less by the end of the book, kind of converged. So you
Mm,
kind of had this big, this is what's going on, instead of cutting back and forth between two different things. Same thing within this one. You had all these different spread out plot points, and they kind of converged there at the end. And I'm assuming, obviously, because we have to have a conclusion to this, the same thing's going to happen in the next book. But, um, and I understand. Like right now, I'm listening to a book that we're going to talk about in a couple months, sometime next year. I think you have it on the schedule. But Star Wars: The Old Republic, Deceived. Um,
hmm
I really like the characters in that book. I really like the book, but it's formatted very much the same. A lot of the other books that I've read, in within the Star Wars canon, are similar. It's kind of, I guess, it's a good way to structure a book. But it's nice to see. You have all these seemingly within like the in-universe explanation, seemingly unrelated points, and they all converge by the end of the story. And despite this being a trilogy, they still kind of do that in each book to kind of round out that that's a conclusion to the book, even though there's more to be known in the next one.
Mhm. Yeah, so as I mentioned, Hard was kind of the driving force behind this book. So I didn't realize this obviously until reading it, but um the name actually of the book actually refers to a fleet of ships in universe. The Dark Force is a fleet of ships that got lost during the Clone Wars. Or I think it was pre-Clone Wars actually.
Yeah, pretty sure it's
It was
pre-Clone
pre-Clone
Wars.
Wars. So this is actually what the plot thread in Heir to the Empire about the slave circuits on ships was kind of building to,
Hmm.
because basically this fleet was the Katana fleet was the actual name of it. The Dark Force was was a nickname because they were all painted very like dark gray. The
Yeah.
ships were all painted dark gray. Anyway, so the Katana fleet was all piloted by slave circuits. Each ship had a very small crew, because most of the piloting was done via slave circuit to the main flagship, the Katana.
Explain a little bit about the slave circuits, because that's something that I didn't really have much knowledge on until reading this book.
So basically, it's something installed on a starship that allows someone from outside the ship to pilot it,
Hmm.
whether that be a computer, a droid, or a pilot. They can control your ship from outside your ship.
Mhm. And one of the key features within the Katana fleet, like David said, was that most of the ships could be controlled from the main flagship, something that does come into play later. Now, the reason the fleet got lost was because of a malfunction that happened with it, and all the ships jumped to hyperspace. um, I believe, right? I know that there was like a
Yeah.
virus or something that got released on it, but there was a point where they all jumped to hyperspace and nobody knew where they went or what happened, but it was a malfunction that ended up happening. And that's why the
Yes.
fleet was lost until, the thing about Star Wars that isn't always realized is, and this book kind of dives into it, in more or less ways, is we are dealing with an entire galaxy. Like the
Mm.
Star Wars universe, despite the fact that people jump around planet to planet and everything, it is very big. So you'd think, oh, you're not going to lose a fleet of ships. That's a lot of ships. How are you going to lose them? Well, there's a lot of unknown space. There's a lot of area. If you just randomly jump, you don't know what you're gonna, where you're gonna end up.
Well, that's like in Heir to the Empire when Luke got stranded out in the middle of space. He
Yeah,
was expecting to not make it because he was like so far away from everything without a hyperdrive.
yeah,
He was just out in the middle of space.
yeah.
Like,
Space is very vast, even in Star Wars.
yeah. And now I think these books do get a little bit more into the like scientific stuff than Star Wars canon does,
Hmm.
but it's still, you're right. It's even in Star Wars canon, the galaxy is pretty big.
Hmm. Yeah, and a couple hundred ships can lose themselves, or
Anyway, so what connects the Nana fleet to Talon Card is the fact that forget how long ago it was supposed to have been, but
I
basically a
don't know
long
if they
time ago.
I don't know if they gave a time frame on it. He just said one time when he was navigator on another ship or
Yeah,
something.
so he was a navigator on a was it another smuggler ship or was it a freighter?
I think a freighter.
I think it was supposed to be a legal freighter. But yeah, so
They were
he was a
attacked.
he was a navigator on a freight ship, and um, they got attacked and basically ended up finding the Katana fleet. And Card um was the only one who actually realized what it was,
Hmm.
and he
Well, they
copied the
jumped. They jumped
yeah.
into hyperspace to get away from the attack, and came
Hmm.
out into hyperspace with a fleet on top of them, and very quickly jumped again to get away because they didn't know what was going on and thought they were, going to be under attack again. And then
Hmm.
Card thought about it after the fact and went back and got the coordinates to where they had jumped to.
Yeah. And he memorized the coordinates and then deleted them off of the ship's nav computer.
Hmm.
So he was the only one who knew where this fleet was.
Supposedly.
Um, yeah. So he brings this up to Mara at the beginning of the book, because basically the his idea is, let's sit on this and then auction it off to the highest bidder, whether that be the Empire or the New Republic.
Hmm. Because at this point, the Empire is after him for helping Luke Skywalker escape.
Hmm. Yeah. So why don't we check in on Luke real quick? So what is Luke Skywalker up to at this point?
Oh, let's find out. I do know he does some stuff, which is pretty
Well,
cool.
so
Um,
right at the end of the of Heir to the Empire, we find out that Admiral Akbar was arrested on charges of treason.
hmm.
So why don't you start there?
Well, let me ask this: where are you reading from? Because I can go over Luke's journey, or are you gonna hop into chapter 4 through 6?
Oh, I wasn't reading through that, but you can hop into whichever one you want. Or go ahead and hop
Well,
into
I mean,
the chapters part.
we have an outline for a reason. I figured we should
Yeah,
use it at some point. My thing's a
yeah.
little blurry. Let me see if I can focus that up a little bit. Okay, so yeah, so remember at the end of the last one, Luke's X-wing is still being towed, from uh, still being towed. So, um, where is everyone at this point? So right now,
So
Han is on
Han,
his way back.
yeah,
Is on his way
Han
back
and
to Coruscant.
yeah, Han, Chewie, and Leia have already gone back to Coruscant. Well, Chewie and Leia were already on Coruscant at the end of um Heir to the Empire. Luke and Lando are still at the um I forget the name of the spaceport.
Yeah, where is it? Do you not have it on here?
I don't.
It skips right over that.
It's not a Brew Sky because that's the one at the beginning of
Yeah,
hold up
I know.
Sluice
I
Van.
Sluice
Sluice Van.
Van. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're still
Um.
at Sluice Van. Han or not Han, Lando, of course, had all the or
Still
was
is
in the
injured.
med. He's injured, so he's in the med bay, and then Luke was waiting on his X-wing to get repaired.
Mm. Now,
Um.
Luke at this point in time is no longer part of the New Republic military as a general like he was during the rebellion. So he is classified as a civilian, which means that he is not a high priority within getting his X-wing made. Now, obviously, we look at that and we're like, why wouldn't Luke Skywalker be a high priority? And it's like, well, if you look at it from the fact that technically he's a civilian, the Jedi are not a established organization at this point in time. So him being a Jedi really means nothing
Hmm.
to the hierarchy in the military there. But essentially, him and Lando devised a little bit of a plan to see about trying to bump themselves up. But in the process, they stumble across this guy that Lando knows, who or knows of, Can you remember his name? Who is a thief, thief of ships. He siphons off ships or whatever. What's his name?
Uh,
I don't know. Your outline wasn't very thorough.
yeah, no. Farrier.
Really not. What did you say his name was?
Farrier.
Farrier. Niles Farrier. Yes, yes, yes.
Yep.
All right, so he comes across this guy, Niles Farrier, and they're trying to, while Sluis Van is a little bit in the down section because, they've been attacked recently. It's a shipping yard, but they've been attacked recently. They're already kind of short staffed. So while everything's kind of chaotic and going on, he's trying to slip in there and steal a couple ships. Well, Luke and Lando come across him and they stop him. What they end up doing is they bargain some with Niles Ferrier and eventually get him to just leave. And in breaking in, he stole some cards, authorization codes and stuff like that, which Lando goes to use to bump Luke's X-wing right up to the top, so that they can go ahead and get that worked on. And with that, Luke is back off to Coruscant.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, he goes to Coruscant first. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's not really much happens on Coruscant. They talk to Akbar a little bit. Um
Talk a
Basically
little bit
the
about talk a little bit about Akbar's allegations because they don't really mention much about that in the book before.
yeah, so basically he's been arrested for treason in relation to the attack at Sluis Van. Um Basically he was kind of set up by both the Empire and Senator Falia
Hmm.
or Counselor Falia. But it was not they weren't working to get Falia and the Empire was not working with the Empire, but they kind of both worked together to accomplish the same goal.
If you or I or any of us don't know much about Bothans, we learn a good bit about them in this book. And one thing that they mention is that Bothans really don't do a whole lot of their own work, but they pounce on a lot of opportunities. And so the
Hmm.
biggest part within Failure in Akbar's downfall is that he is pouncing on the opportunity to while Akbar's still down. I don't know I can't remember all the specific allegations that were done with it all, but there was a bank transfer in Akbar's name for some money, and that is a big part of it. There are some other things that obviously
Basically,
happened.
the biggest premise of it was Akbar. It was Akbar's idea to have the all the capital ships being used as
Hmm.
freighters with skeleton crews, and that was the chance that the Empire jumped on to steal capital ships. So
Hmm.
essentially, the allegations were Akbar did that on purpose to set up perfect trap for the Empire. Or not trap, but perfect opportunity for the Empire.
Yeah, yeah. Trap was a good choice of words there for Akbar. But to be fair, well, not to be fair, but in all of this, essentially, Thalia is trying to get himself into Akbar's position, belittling him and all this stuff there, so that he can be, you
Mm.
know, in with Akbar's influence, position, power, all that fun stuff. So what we see throughout this book, and it gets really annoying, but see, this is why I don't follow normal politics to that much, is because there's so much infighting that, and this is one thing that even Thrawn mentions. Um, they're using failure. They talk about it at one point. Him and Pelion, they talk about the fact that they're using Failure to get infighting within the New Republic. It's a well known saying, but like an empire that crumbles from within will never rise again. because you have infighting, and that's a big problem. And that's what's really happened here is like, for all intents and purposes, Thrawn's gonna have to do very little as long as he just keeps stoking the fire that is, the infighting that's happening currently within the New Republic. You know, um, the good guys, the guys that we like, Han, Leia, Luke, and all of them, are having a real hard time when they're butting heads against failure, having a hard time getting things done. Actually, near the end of this book, they kind of go over his head and go back on that rebel streak because
Mm,
they believe that they're doing the right thing, which, per the way the book looks, they are doing the right thing. But, it's one of those instances where they kind of just have to do what they have to do because bureaucracy is kind of getting in the way.
yeah. Now, why don't we go ahead and because at this point it kind of again it splits off to Han and Lando, Luke, and Leia and Chewie again. So why don't we go ahead and just talk a little bit about Luke side of this whole thing because it's honestly the
Yeah.
least interesting.
It has some interesting ideas behind it that we can get into, but as a whole, it is kind of a
Because
little less interesting until a little bit later in the book.
yeah, because like okay, in Heir to the Empire, obviously it focused a lot more on Luke, but it kind of took Luke kind of took more of a backseat in this book. I feel like through the middle of it,
Might I
but
suggest something? Maybe not. Let's just continue on what we're doing.
okay. So Luke kind of finishes or continues on what he was where he was going at the um end of Heir to the Empire
He
because he
he
goes
gets
to Jomark to find the Jedi Master, alleged Jedi
mhm,
Master, I should say.
yeah. So yeah, like you said, there's not a whole lot that really happens. He spends some time with Druid Sabaoth, and he learns from him. Um, there's many times with the inner dialogue that we get from Luke. Luke is like, Master Yoda, Master Ben, never told me anything like this. Like, this is not how they operated. But he was like, well, you know, there might have just been a lot of things that they weren't able to tell me or whatever. Um, but we also do get to see, and Luke kind of clicks into this at some point later on, near the end of his time on Joe Mark, that maybe Drew Sabaoth isn't quite all there. Um, and even beside that point, a lot of his ideas aren't quite what Jedi are supposed to be. One being the Sabayoth very much sees it as, since he is a Jedi, he can do, say, and rule however he pleases. Like there's nobody who can really uh uh challenge him in that area. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he has this little town that he runs, and he runs it. He goes into the town and um he goes in any squabbles that are going along. He listens to it and then he decides what's to be done. If someone has to pay someone else, if you know whatever the ruling is and whatever he says goes. And so that's one thing that he tries to work on Luke with. There is a point later or earlier on in the book, um, or that might have been, was that in Heir to the Empire or was that in this one where Luke has that instance in the bar?
That no that
Because
was in this book. Because there
okay,
is a point where Han, Lando, and Luke are still together after Leia has already split off from the group, but
and that's
that
when
we did kind of skip over, but that is when Luke has this
yeah.
case where he has to sit where he's in a bar and there's a squabble that breaks out and they ask the Jedi what to do.
Yeah, they specifically call it, say the Jedi will tell us what the ruling is. And this is the first instance for Luke. He doesn't know what he's doing. He just does the best he can
Yeah.
within the knowledge with what he's given. but a lot of what like whenever he does it in this little village that Sabaoth is over, uh Sabaoth sees it as him not being as decisive. There's one instance where he says, "I'm gonna go look at this or that." He said, "No, you should have just said, you should have been very plain and simple about it and gone about your day. Don't waste your time with this." There's a lot of things, a lot of new things, and a lot of things that not necessarily Luke is going to keep, but there's a lot of new things Luke is being introduced to at this point in time. And I do think it's kind of good that, Luke is getting introduced to some of this stuff because it probably does, and we'll see as the character grows in the next book, and but it probably helps him discern more between how he actually is to think as a Jedi and how he shouldn't think.
Hmm. Yeah, and obviously when he kind of comes to the conclusion that at the end of this whole thing um that Sabaoth is not exactly who he says he is.
Mm,
Um, he kind of realizes Sabaoth is a dark Jedi. We already knew that from Heir to the Empire, but he realizes Sabaoth is a dark Jedi. And he's ended up actually gets ended up being saved, uh, more or less saved from Sabaoth by Mara Jade, which we'll come back to.
okay. Real quick, before we hit on Mara Jade and that area of the story, I think we should real briefly, just because of how detached it is from the rest of the story, we should talk about what Chewbacca and Leia are doing at this point in time.
That's where I was going to go to because um it's like the Lando Han stuff is more intertwined with the
Hmm.
overarching plot of the story. Um, right. So Leia and Chewie kind of pick up again the same mission that they kind of had at the end of Heir to the Empire, which was to go to the basically Leia wants to try to make peace with the Nogri
Hmm.
after finding out that they kind of view Vader as royalty,
Hmm.
and um Leia being the Lady Vader, the daughter of Vader. um she kind of has a, I don't know what's the right word, basically kind of influence over the Nogri.
Hmm. Um. So yeah, after the dealings on Coruscant, her and Chewbacca take the Falcon and go to Endor.
Mhm.
So on Endor is where they meet. Uh, uh, what's his name?
uh
What's his name?
Caber
Cabrak. Hmm.
Cabrak,
Yep,
yeah.
you're on. You got it. Yep, Cabrak. They meet Cabrak there. Now, one interesting thing to note is that so when they first get there, I think they got there a little bit earlier than the meeting time. So they take the Falcon and they place it in orbit around Endor. And when they're going around, they go through the space where the Emperor's throne room was and where the Emperor died. And Leia, through sensing his presence and all that stuff, kind of blacks out at that point in time. Um, it's a very small little thing that they do, and they mention, but it is interesting to see that someone like the Emperor leaves an impression, uh, you
Mhm.
know, when and where he was, especially where he died. But
Mhm.
anyways, so after that, they board on to Kabarak's ship and they leave the Falcon in orbit. That's important. We'll come back to that later. And then they go back to the Nogri homeworld, um, and more or less are fine getting down to the planet, but there's a slight hiccup, and for some reason, Thrawn is there. not specifically there, but he reads the report, or I believe, right? Where he reads the report of what happened with the ship coming down and finds it suspicious and wants to go check things out.
So Thrawn is on I don't remember the name of the Nogri homeworld.
You keep talking, I'll see if I can look it up.
Okay, but Thrawn is there. Because
Mhm.
he went there to uh basically to try, to tell the Nogri, look, you have one last chance to find Leia Organa.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, when the ship comes in, when Cabrak's ship comes in, uh, they see the Star Destroyer in orbit, and you know, he kind of a little bit, well, Chewbacca tries to kill him because he thinks they double crossed him,
Mhm.
and so through certain things, basically, Cabrak kind of recovers it, makes it not look too suspicious to the other Nogri, but Thrawn sees it and said, "Okay, this is suspicious." Um, so basically, through the whole like side mission of Leia's, um, he ends up befriending the matriarch of Abrax. I forget exactly what they called it because they have a bunch of uh
I think they just call it the
interesting
matriarch.
matriarch, yeah, of Abrax tribe. Um, who is actually Cabrak's grandmother.
Mhm.
Basically through I'm kind of glossing over a big chunk of the book here, but through
Yeah.
certain events with the um run-ins with the Empire and all this stuff, she ends up getting the Matriarch on her side, and as a result, ends up getting the Nogri people on her side by showing that the Empire was keeping their planets from being completely inhabitable. Because there were certain spots of the planet that were inhabitable, but they were
Talk
kind
a
of
little
keeping.
bit about the destruction of her planet, of the planet a little bit. I know we talked about it a little bit in the last book because I think of what Kabarak said, but talk a little bit more about the destruction of the planet, and then obviously what we find out about it.
Yeah, so basically, the planet was essentially polluted from a battle that happened, which initially we assume, or we are led to believe was the rebels fighting the Empire. However, we come to find out that it actually was a battle in the Clone Wars. Um, that all this destruction happened, and essentially most of the planet's ecology was destroyed, and only certain parts of the planet are inhabitable. That's where the Nogri currently live, and the rest of the planet is covered in this. I forget what they call it, but basically this plant, this like grass type plant that was there before, but we find out that the variety that is currently living on or currently on the planet was actually engineered by the Imperials to restrict the growth of all other plants.
Hmm.
And this grass is like, it's not good for food or anything. It's just kind of, it's a weed basically. And so that's the only thing
Yeah,
that'll grow on most of the planet. And because it's growing on most of the planet, it's killing off all other plant life.
yeah.
And
So,
that's what Leia finds out and tells the Nogri people, and that's how that's
hmm
why they decide to side with Leia instead of the Empire.
hmm and yeah, because they swore loyalty to the Empire, despite the high tax that the Empire required from them and their people. They were going to stick with them and say, sorry, you might be the Malari Ush, but you know we're not going to rebel against the Empire. And then they found out that essentially the Empire was keeping them like they were instead of helping them like they were presumed to be doing. And yeah, they sided with Leia. Now I do want to mention this. This is a side note, but I want to mention it. What is it with Leia and her side of the story having that one character with the very annoying voice? Now, again, I listened to the audiobook, but the Wookiee in the last one
Oh,
was
Rara.
yeah, Rara was a little annoying to listen to. And then you had the Matriarch here, and she was a little annoying to listen to too with the raspy voice. I was like, I don't know. Hopefully there's nothing in the third book. They probably will be if they keep setting this trend of it. But
Hmm. Well, it's the
anyways.
way that I don't know if we were listening to the same audiobook. Probably because I don't know if there are that many versions of this audiobook. It probably was the
I'm just
same
listening
version.
to the probably was.
Um, but yeah, it was definitely the voices are definitely interesting. Most of them are I feel like are really good. Like
Mhm.
um, I think his voice for Alan Carr is really good, and his voice
I
for Han and
honestly,
Lando are really good.
for the most part, and I've listened to a couple different narrators within the books, Star Wars books I listened to. For the most part, like I've been very impressed with all of them. Like any of the voice worked acting. For this specifically, since we have counterparts to the characters that we know in the books.
Mm,
I do think his his Lando is pretty good, his Han's pretty good, Luke, all of them. I think they're pretty good within capturing the essence. Obviously they
mm,
don't sound exactly right, but like his Lando, I think the tone in which he takes with Lando is pretty spot on. Um, you know,
yeah. Let me see if I can find who actually
ow,
did the
that is the wrong one.
let's see if I can find out who actually read this. Mark Thompson.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, Mark Thompson did the reading for well, this the whole trilogy. Um, I did really like him.
Yeah,
Um,
he does a good job.
yeah, but I don't know where we're going with this. Right, we were talking about Leia. That's right. And so after that, she heads back to Coruscant. So this kind of leads us into well, let's talk about because it's kind of short. So let's talk about uh Bard and Mara Jade for a second here
Hmm.
before we jump into Lando and Han. Because, like I said, Lando and Han's storyline really is the main storyline of the book.
Hmm.
Um, because you get most of the plot development in that storyline. So let's jump on um the story of Card and Mara Jade here for a second. So obviously they start off being hunted by Thrawn because obviously at the end of the Heir to the Empire, Thrawn found out that Card was hiding Luke Skywalker,
Yeah.
which he obviously wasn't too pleased to find out. So he put a bounty on Card's head, actually all of Card's organization.
Hmm.
So Mara, obviously I mentioned earlier he tells Mara about the him knowing about the Dark Force and saying that they have leverage to be able to in the future, depending on whatever happens, that they have leverage to um whether they
Something to
yeah
bargain with.
whether they decide to bargain with or basically do business with the Empire or the New Republic.
Hmm.
Um, now, kind of a plot point that we glossed over in Heir to the Empire that comes back in this was that in the process of Lando and Han meeting with Talon Card, one of Card's men leaves a ship on, I forget the name of the planet again, but
Whenever they met the guy at the bar in the last
yeah,
one when they were trying to meet up with the clients. The client went with them on their ship. The
yeah,
meetup contact went with on their ship, leaving his ship there. Which
yeah.
obviously I think at that time too, it also was surrounded by Imperials, so they
It was
didn't want to have to deal
impounded.
with that.
It
Yeah,
was
or
impounded.
so. Yeah, yeah,
Well, it was impounded by the local government.
yeah.
And Han pulled some strings to get it out of impoundment. All Card had to do was pick it up, and he sends Mara to go pick it up.
Hmm.
While bringing it back, he's captured by the Empire. And to kind of get out of the Empire's grasp, she basically uses the Dark Force as a bargaining chip.
Hmm.
She's like, basically, if you let me go, because I know Card knows where it is. He didn't tell me where it is yet. If you let me go, I'll find out where it is. I'll tell you where it is in exchange for dropping the bounties on all of Card's organization.
Yeah.
And obviously, the Empire goes along with this, and nothing bad happens. She's able to go back to um where the planet where Card's hiding, and Card tells her where the Dark Force is, and she goes back to Thrawn, and then they hold up each end of the bargain. No, of course not. The
Well,
Empire tra the
go
Empire
ahead.
tracks her to Card's base.
Which honestly, I think is a little bit of an amateur move on her part. Like she should have realized that they were going to track her. Like the fact that
Yeah,
she doesn't even think about a tracker, that's a little bit like I kind of understand, right? In A New Hope, when Luke, Han, Chewbacca, and Leia don't think about there being a tracker or anything. I think Leia even mentions at one point, like, "Oh, there's not a tracker on it, is it?" And he's like, "Oh, of course not." There might have been a line of this. I'm more okay with that though, because Han maybe should be experienced enough, but Luke wouldn't think anything of that, and Leia maybe should be experienced enough with it, but maybe not. But
but they
Mara
wouldn't have had
definitely should be.
yeah. But also, in A New Hope, they wouldn't have had any reason to think that the Empire would have put a tracker on their ship because they just shot their way out of the Death Star.
Yeah, that's another thing to think about too with it, is that yeah, they weren't granted access to leave. So,
Yeah,
there's also that thought within it behind.
yeah.
But
But
Mara hands down should have thought about that fact.
well, yeah, because one thing, she's a smuggler now. She shouldn't trust anyone, and
Mhm.
she was a former Imperial. She knows how they operate.
Exactly. So this is a big old miss fuel on her part. She definitely should have done better than that. But this is where
Mm,
we're at. So what ends up happening is essentially she leads them right back to Card's base. They say they're gonna give her a week or 2 weeks, and she gets nothing. Gets back there. They take Card into custody. They let most of his men run around, and then Thrawn basically says, don't step out of line, but I can get you back to where you were as the Emperor's hand.
mm,
But like, one more mistake and well, you're out.
yeah.
And
Um.
she doesn't cross him ever. She becomes
No, of course
Thrawn's
not.
hand.
Yeah.
She's blue now. She's basically a Smurf.
So what ends up happening is Thrawn is in custody, and of course Mara also made the mistake of saying, "Hey, Card knows where this massive fleet of ships are," and Wesley, I can't remember what was the Empire's whole plan at the end of Heir to the Empire. What were they trying to achieve by attacking
They 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 wanted the
Sloan?
smallest. They wanted the smallest fleet in the galaxy. Oh no, they wanted to enlarge their fleet. I got it
Yeah,
backwards.
yeah. So, when Mara said that Card knows this where this giant, mass of ships is, of course Thrawn's going to jump on the opportunity to um get all these ships. Now, where he's going to find the men to operate it, I don't know. More on that later. Um,
But good thing is it's the Katana fleet, so you don't need as many men
yeah, yeah. Um, so
or
yeah,
not men.
basically, Card is an Imperial custody being tortured to try to, so the Empire can try to get information about where the Catan fleet is.
So what does Mara do in this time? Kick back, relax, and smoke a cigar?
No, she actually, surprisingly, is showing loyalty to Card.
Hmm.
So she wants to get Card out of Imperial captivity. And I wonder who who do you think Mara Jade goes to get help?
Let's see. All her allies are either don't trust her because Cardsmen don't trust her anymore, or in prison because Card's in prison. So I don't know who she would turn to.
Well, weirdly enough, because last I remember, she wanted to kill him. She goes to find Luke Skywalker.
What?
I don't know why we randomly started doing this.
I'm just following your lead. You started it, and I was like, I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah,
But
I don't know.
we can cut it out and move on from it. But yeah. So real quick before we get her off on her tangent to find Luke, what she does is she pulls. So what we find out is that the Emperor had some back doors to everything in the Empire, and these were things that were hardwired into the system. So these aren't things that like this the normal security code changes that does not affect this. So she, being the Emperor's hand, basically has a backdoor into everything Imperial, unless they just
Mhm.
completely change everything. Because the Emperor never wanted to be locked out of his own stuff. So, understandably. And so Mara knows all these things. So she finds the back doors into it, and finds out the flight plan or whatever for uh the for Thrawn ship
Chimera.
and the Chimera. And so she finds out where they're going to be, and she keeps that in mind, and then she goes and gets down to the planet below, talks to what is Card's head guy? What's his name?
Um,
I know it's gonna be
it's right there.
stupid when I don't remember it.
It's right
But anyway,
there.
she goes to this guy and basically after convincing him that she's on their side and trying to get Card out, and that everything was just a big mistake, um she gets him a ship and a bird. One of the Islamari. They say two different things in it. And that is one thing that's interesting in this book is different people pronounce it different ways even though it's voice acted by the same person, which, obviously different people pronounce things different ways. That is an interesting thing. But Yeah, so she gets Nissa Lamari to take because she doesn't know what might happen, and I think she knows that Luke is on Jomark with Sabayoth, meaning that she might not be sure about Sabayoth. So she takes this and she goes to Jomark to try and find Luke and convince him to help her.
Hmm.
Did you find it?
No, which is kind of annoying because it's don't think it's that hard of a name to remember, but
No, it's just not a very standouty name.
maybe that's why I don't remember because it's not
Uh, mm, let's see.
Aves.
Aves. Yeah.
There you go.
So Aves. So, anyways,
Yeah,
she meets with Aves, does all that stuff, and is on her way to go find, um, uh, what's his face, Luke Skywalker.
yeah. And so that obviously as we mentioned earlier, that's how Mara kind of ends up more or less saving Luke from um Sabaoth.
Sabath.
Yeah. Now, I don't think Luke was in any really in any immediate danger at the time, but then he was when Mara showed up because that's kind of when Sabaoth went crazy or went
Yeah.
crazier,
So,
you know.
so essentially, what happens is, yeah, she goes to land. Sabaoth starts to attack her, throwing like boulders and stuff at her, rocks at her, and essentially gets her ship to crash. And then um they kind of have a standoff. Um then Luke comes out. Long story short, they knock out Sabaoth. Mara wants to kill him, but Luke, being Luke Skywalker, says we can't kill him. That's not the Jedi way.
Mm,
Anyways, and decides to keep him alive. So obviously he's going to be a non a non what's what I'm looking for. He's not going to factor in any more to the story, obviously,
yeah.
because I didn't decide to kill him. But anyway, so then they go and they get off Joe Mark and um go to.
They go back to the Chimera, save the card.
Well, where do they go first? Where do they go first? They don't go. They have to go. No, they go to. So essentially, the plan for them to get on the Chimera is for them to the supply ships that get onto the Chimera. They're going to hijack one of those and get on there, and the unloading time during that time is when they're going to get in, get a card, and get back. Is what their plan
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And through uh the rescue of Card kind of harkens back to a lot of stuff from A New Hope because
Hmm.
I think Luke even in his like internal monologue in the book even mentions some things that are similar about that in the when Luke and Han rescued Leia from the
Yeah,
Death Star.
yeah,
Because even though this is a Star Destroyer, not the Death Star, there's Imperial architecture is very similar.
yeah.
Regardless. So like a lot of the
And
like cell blocks and stuff are very similar.
one thing that they do harken back to, and that Luke does reference, is the trash chute,
Yeah,
and that's actually how they get into the cell block to rescue Card.
yeah. So that they use it as an entrance, not an escape this time.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Well,
so while they're
technically,
trying
they
to
use it to escape.
yeah, so while they're trying
Technically,
to escape, I'm drawing a blank on what exactly goes wrong, but something goes wrong, and they can't use the plan that they were actually planning to escape. But little did you know how they actually get off the Chimera?
well, now I'm trying to figure out what that blank was about how what went wrong. That's gonna bug me. But so random fact, uh, a while ago, intel came in and told Thrawn that the Millennium Falcon, the ship widely known as the ship of Han Solo and Chewbacca in association with Leia and Luke, was just randomly orbiting around Endor. So what do? They go over there and they say, hey, this is ours now. So they have it on their ship. And that actually works out to be a bad idea because you know what happens when when Card and Luke and what's her name? Mar are trying to escape, they stumbled across the fact that the Millennium Falcon is on the ship.
So instead of doing whatever they were gonna do to escape, they just steal the Millennium Falcon to escape.
Yeah. And they get out and the funny thing is halfway through this once Thrawn figures out what's going on. Again, I don't remember what went wrong that all of a sudden they realized something was up. But whatever happened, um, Thrawn figures it out, and then he figures out that Mara has a back door into everything. And so the best way, despite the fact that it's going to hinder them some, he believes it's going to hinder them group trying to escape more for them to shut down all power to the ship. So the main computer on the ship is shut down. Um
Mm.
and because of that, once they're on the Falcon, they're pretty much home free. There's still some things to get through, but for the most part, because the ship is shut down and it takes a while to boot back up, there's nothing that they can do once they get out of the ship there. And that's what they do. They get out of the ship, they get out of there, and Card, Mara Jade, and Luke all head back to Coruscant to talk to um uh what's her name?
Mon Mothma.
Mon
But
Mothma. Moth was coming to name, but yeah.
but before we get to that, because that is the point where kind of all those storylines converge. So before we get to that, we've got another storyline to wrap up.
Yep. Start
So
and wrap up.
yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, Lando and Han travel with Luke for a little bit to start out with. So they go to this planet, and Lando's actually there when Luke, when you mentioned Luke in in the bar,
Hmm.
settling the argument.
Well, that
Um,
technically they're all there. Han. So real quick to establish why they're here. So after all the stuff happened with
bar.
Akbar, and we're still trying to figure out. They're trying to figure out how Phalia did it, and they're trying to trace it back to him. So what they do is they go to this planet here where during the rebel days, the Bothans had some influence, or not necessarily some influence, but like they participated in like a battle or something in this place, and they don't normally do stuff like that. There was a little bit of an odd sense around this planet, so this is where they were going to start their investigation to see how they could tie Phalia back to all this stuff. Well, they
Hmm.
make a hit on it because they come in contact with one of Phalia's men on this planet, and once Han and Lando touch down, uh, they're using the Lady Luck, I believe, at this point. But
Hmm.
once they touch down on this planet, um, they they see one of the guys. Well, they're supposed to meet Luke in the bar, so Lando goes to meet Luke, and Han tracks the other guy for a little while.
Yeah. So basically, um, to kind of gloss through this a little bit because we are a little bit pressed for time now here. Um,
Sum up's good.
that's not so. Um, basically, Han gets captured by whoever Thalia's aide was meeting with. Um, throughout a whole bunch of stuff. Uh, the Empire shows up, unrelated to them being there. The Empire shows up, um, because Luke is there, or because Luke shows up with Han. Han's able to prove his identity because they didn't believe him that he was Han Solo. They thought he was a spy. Um,
Hmm.
so the people who kidnapped Han actually end up helping them escape um the Empire. Luke goes off on his merry way to go find Sabaoth, and Han and Lando and the Lady Luck actually end up going with these people that they just met. That the
Yeah,
people who
and
Felia's aide was meeting with.
yeah, and they all get on their own ships, Star Destroyer or
Cruisers.
cruisers.
Or
All right, so
Dreadnought,
they get
sorry.
on their dreadnoughts that they have there that just came in, and get to those ships, and then they hop into hyperspace and go to this unknown location, where this
So,
secret base is hidden.
now, my point
Also, we
is,
find out that Han apparently is known, or some old friend, or it's a little vague on what's going on. But the guy who's in charge of all these people is supposedly someone that Han's supposed to know.
mhm, yeah. So, once they get to where they're going here, come to find out that I'm blanking on his name.
Senator Bale is Iblis.
Bill is
I am extremely lucky to have remembered that because I was literally about to look it up and then it just like smacked me like a ton of bricks and I was like, "Oh, I know it now."
yeah. So, what was his last name again? Sorry.
Senator Bale Iblis.
Iblis, that's right.
Iblis.
Senator is
Uh,
Iblis.
he is supposedly the reason that Han is supposed to know him is because he is the senator or whatever on Corellia, obviously where Han grew up. And apparently there was a visit to a school that Han was a part of at one point in time that Bail Iblis was there, and Han asked some questions that he was told or kind of prodded into doing it, with some peer pressure from his friends, as kind of a jokey, oh, you really shouldn't ask that kind of a question. But it actually caught his eye, and apparently, Iblis has been a little bit of a stalker, child predator over here, keeping his eye on Han Solo throughout his whole entire career,
Yeah.
and following him, knowing what's going on. Also, a key
So,
point within all this is that apparently Bail Iblis is supposed to be dead, so
yeah.
that also happened.
Bel Iblis was also, so, come to find out, Bel Iblis was a founding member of the rebellion
Mm-hmm.
alongside Bail Organa and Mon Mothma.
Mon Mothma. Mm-hmm.
But due to some disagreements with Mon Mothma, I think it was after the destruction of Alderaan,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bel Iblis left the rebellion because of certain things. Basically, what he said is that Bail Organa was the only person that Mon Mothma would actually listen to, and so after he died, obviously, when Alderaan was destroyed, she kind of stopped really like actually listening to other people.
Yeah. That is one thing that I don't think about a whole lot is that, yeah, Bail Organa was on Alderaan when it blew up, and that's how he died. Like, I don't think about that much, you know? Because,
Hmm.
like, when I'm watching the original trilogy, like, I understand Star Wars is a over-connecting story. Like, it's all supposed to be in the same universe and everything. But, like, Bail Organa from the prequels and Princess Leia's dad in A New Hope, not the same person. I don't think of it like that because it just seems different. I don't know why. I just separate the two. You know?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, but basically, yeah, the he was a founding member of the rebellion, left, due to some,
And left on some bad terms too.
yeah, bad terms. Um, while they're there, Lando and Han find out that the 3 dreadnoughts that Iblis has came from the Katana fleet.
Hmm.
So that kind of sparks this whole thing of them trying to find the Katana fleet.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So some more. I would say not too much else happens. While on while they're with Bail Iblis. Essentially, they say that they would love to have him as part of the, New Republic because he does have some fighting force that would be helpful for the New Republic, especially within the line of ships. But he says he really won't do it unless he gets somewhat of a formal request from Mon Mothma, or from the New Republic. So they kind of leave like that, but he says, I'm gonna go ahead and take you back to whatever the planet is that, we got you from, and y'all can go about your way. So they do that, and then Han and Lando go back to Coruscant, where everyone else is,
Yeah.
and
So
where Pard is now with information about the Katana fleet.
yeah, so now they all meet with Mon Mothma and Thalia, the Katana fleet. Um, and Card, is kind of trying to use his leverage to actually Card is using his leverage to try to help Leia, Han, and Luke
Hmm.
because he doesn't like. You kind of get the impression that he doesn't like Thalia either.
Yeah, nobody likes failure.
Well, Thalia ends up getting put over the whole Katana fleet project, basically. Um, so basically they're going to send out a force to go recover the Katana fleet.
Well, first off,
Except,
they're gonna send out a. Oh, were you about to get to that?
well, what I was about to say is that they were going to send out, like I said, people to go out and recover the Katana fleet, but Card the night before gives Luke, gives Luke or gives Leia. He gives one of
So
them.
he,
Go ahead.
so well, so the first thought is because the Empire has a. I don't remember necessarily how they got this person, but someone else apparently knows what the Katana fleet is, and the Empire has that person, and this person probably won't take too long to crack. So Card is over here, and he's sitting like, "Hey, we got to go ahead and jump on this, otherwise it's going to be in the Empire's hands." So he wants to act now, and so do the rest of them. But Phalia is like, "Hey, we don't know if this is true or not. We this might be a trap, another trap for us to send all of our forces out there to get this fleet, and then there's nothing there." So they all suggest that what if they send out a task force, a tech crew, or something like that to go and make sure that this is real and legit, and then if it's legit, we'll bring in more people. And so that's kind of how the meeting concludes. Phalia is told that the next morning, uh, everything will happen. He'll get his task force and everything together, and they'll head out there to check and make sure that Card is telling the truth. And Card says that he won't tell him the coordinates until the next morning. Well,
Yeah.
he gives Leia a little bit of a look, and Leia knows to go meet him in his room or to go talk to him. So they
Yeah.
go to his room, find out that he says because he doesn't like and trust Phalia, he wants them to go right now. So he gives them the
Hmm.
coordinates, and Leia sends Han, Luke, Lando, and a couple other people.
Rogue Squadron.
I know Rogue Squadron is part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And they go out to check on the Katana fleet.
Yeah. Um. So then, of course, the next morning, Thalia finds out about that and is, you know, is
Not
kind
too
is kind
happy.
of a goes through kind of a hissy fit about it. Um,
Yep.
so they go to recover, got to recover the fleet, and then the Empire shows up. So, well, Luke, or the task force that Luke, Han, Lando, and all them have already landed on one of the ships, which actually turns out to be the Katana.
Yeah. So they were
Because
going to go to one ship, but yeah, one ship was calling to Luke, and he said, "Actually, let's go to this one." And Han
yeah,
was like, "All right, let's do it."
yeah, so it turned out to be the Katana. So while they're there, Rogue Squadron's kind of um keeping watch around everything, and well, they're all on board the Katana. Empire shows up. Um, so once the Empire shows up, and Thalia and them are there too on their cruiser, Thalia orders Rogue Squadron to come back
They're
and
also
leave.
under arrest.
Yeah,
When they first get there, they say that they're under arrest
yeah,
because they obviously aren't supposed to be doing this.
yeah. Orders Rogue Squadron to come back and leave on Luke and Lando.
Yeah.
Obviously, Rogue Squadron's not going to do that. The Empire starts attacking, sends out fighters, sends out landing craft, through all sorts of different things. Uh, fighting starts. Um, Thalia orders the fighters from the cruiser that just got there to be recalled because they're leaving. Um, Leia and Card kind of get him talking, turn on the comms, and Thalia kind of or basically admits to the entire fleet that's there that he views he's got a very low view of the military.
Mhm.
He
They're
basically
expendable.
they're expendable. He basically uses them or views them as a means to get what he wants. So
Yeah.
obviously they don't really like that. So the captain of the ship arrests Phalia, and Leia kind of
Mhm.
takes charge, sends out the fighters again to help Rogue Squadron. While all this is going on, the Empire wants to send another ship to back up the ship that's the Star Destroyer that's there. So
Mhm.
Thrawn says, "Okay, well, let's get the Chimera ready. We'll head out there." And then Sabaoth shows up, and Thrawn says, "We'll deal with you when we get back." Sabaoth says, "No, you're going to deal with me now." So Thrawn has to send another Star Destroyer out there, a different one, to help. And at the battle there at the Fauna fleet, um, Bill Iblis's fleet actually shows up to help the New Republic too. And Card's Card's organization also shows up.
Mhm.
Through certain things, there's a bunch of stuff happens. Mara's
Forgot to mention.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
man, it won't really matter that much. All I was gonna say was that we forgot to mention with Card's fleet showing up and his men and all showing up. While on Coruscant, um, he told Mara to go get his men
Yeah,
and meet them there.
yeah,
So that's what all happened there. So Mara's leading the charge on that end. Uh, Obviously, Bail Iblis comes out, and Leia formally requests that he help them in this
yeah,
fight, and all stuff. So that kind of starts to help smooth some things over within this
yeah,
relations between them.
yeah. Um, so throughout the battle, a lot of stuff happens. Mara's ship actually ends up getting damaged, and she has to go. I forget what they call it. Basically, she has to eject
Hmm.
into space.
Yeah,
Um, and during the ejection process, basically everything, all the systems in the ejecting mechanism go wrong, and so she has very limited air supply and stuff. So you know, there's that whole thing.
basically, she's basically stranded in the middle of a wasteland with a bunch of.
Yeah,
She's basically dead.
yeah.
Um,
So
Now, continue.
Go ahead, because I was about to wrap
Well,
up.
what I was gonna say was we do need to touch on what's happening with. There's an air battle going on, but there's also a in-ship battle going on the Katana,
Right.
um,
Yeah,
flagship.
they did a couple of the landing craft did make it to the Katana, so there were
Hmm.
stormtroopers coming in. So they had to kind of create, or Luke, Han, and Lando had to get kind of creative to kill all of them. I think they ended up
Because they have
basically,
a tech team.
yeah,
They have a bunch of guys who are not used to battle, and so they kind of have to, yeah, get creative with what they're doing.
yeah. So they basically end up jettisoning, or
Yeah,
basically
so
opening up a lot like a big group of them to the vacuum of space, killing them.
yeah, so they end up getting through a lot of them. In a bit of a firefight at the beginning. But there's a couple left. They're right there by the bridge. So what they end up doing is Luke gets them all in the bridge, and then he cuts a hole or whatever in the ship somewhere, causing the airlock to, yada yada yada, sucks a bunch of them out, and then they get in the bridge. Now, while on the bridge, there's not really a whole lot they can do. But they think about it being as a katana fleet. This is a ship that can be, you know, used and control other ships. They end up taking out. I don't remember if it's the backup ship or if it's the main ship that came out of hyperspace for the Empire. But they take one of the working ships that still has the remote control, yada yada, and essentially just ram it into the other one. Yes, very technical terms. Yada yada.
Um,
And
but
that
yeah,
kind of helps win the battle because it's less. I mean, now instead of having two star destroyers, you have one, and that's a big difference.
mhm,
And so that helps them win the battle. The other ship ends up hightailing it out of there, getting out of there, so that they can
mhm.
report back and do all that stuff. Um,
So
and
now
then
there's three kind of important things that can happen here. First off, I'll kind of say, after the battle, uh, oddly enough, all Luke can think about is Mara's stranded out in space. We have to go save her.
yeah, he felt it like because when she was stranded out there, she had no comms or nothing, and her first thought was, "Let me call out for Luke and see if that
Mm,
works." And
yeah,
it did. She called out
yeah,
for Luke. He heard her, and he was like, "I gotta go get her. I gotta help her."
yeah.
And so he does.
Um, so that's kind of obviously, getting into some stuff that happens later on, which I don't know if
Mhm.
that I don't know how much that gets into it in Thrawn Trilogy, but obviously, we know in Legends,
Yeah,
Luke and Mara Jade end up getting married, so there's that.
yeah.
Um,
The best
but
relationships start off with one of the others trying to kill the other one. Yeah, that made sense.
sure, yeah.
I mean,
Anyway,
Sarah had it out for me when we first started dating, so that's all I'm saying. She probably
yeah,
still does. Anyways, moving on.
she's just playing the long game.
Exactly, exactly. She's putting eye drops in my food. It'll look like I had a heart attack.
Yeah.
It will make sense too with all the stress I'm under, so it's all good. All right, David, wrap this story up.
So yeah, there's two other kind of important things that we find out here at the end, or here during the battle here. So one kind of we find out during the middle of the battle is the fact that there's only like a dozen ships left
Mhm.
out of this massive fleet, meaning the Empire has already been there.
Well, let me ask you this: does it mean that the Empire has already been there? And that might end up being what actually does end up happening. But my first thought was, look at all the people that we are finding out actually know about the Katana fleet. I
True.
mean, part of the ships that Bail Iblis has are from the Katana fleet.
Yeah.
So I know that there's less ships here, and I know that they're probably going to end up being ships the Empire has, but there could also be some other person who might have them all.
true, but the impression we get in the book is that the Empire has
Yeah,
been
yeah,
taking
yeah.
ships.
I w- I was just putting that thought out there.
But yeah. So one other kind of important thing that we find out is all of the boarding party that the Empire sent, all the stormtroopers that boarded the Katana, they all had the same face.
Yes,
Which what does that tell you, Wesley?
they're twins.
Obviously, obviously, the Empire has started recruiting identical octuplets to fight in their army.
Yeah. They also have a very strict, hey, you have to look like this. If you don't look like this, I'm sorry, you're not in it. It's a little, it's not very progressive, but the Empire is very selective.
The
And
Empire's always
it's
been
not it's
racist.
that's true. That's true. I mean the Empire is basically Nazis. So,
Yeah. But
uh
but no, we find
yeah.
out that the Empire has been cloning soldiers.
So
They
being
found
that
they found that's what they call them, but basically cloning devices. Presumably now I don't remember if they actually said this or not. The impression I got that it was in the Mount Tantus vault.
it probably would be. Probably that probably would make most sense. I'm curious to see how they go about dealing with the cloning. Being that, like we've said before, this takes place before Attack of the Clones, prequels, anything related to cloning. So I'm
Kaminoans
interested to
weren't a
see,
thing.
yeah, so I'm interested to see how they go about doing this.
Mm.
You know, is it just something that they say Imperial scientists have been working on? Probably. But I'm interested to see how they go about doing this. This is going to be interesting. But I cut out there for a second, so I don't know what specifically you said. But this obviously means that instead of the Empire taking a couple years to be able to man these ships, they might have a much shorter timetable, depending on how many clones they already have, how many how long it takes for them to clone. There's a bunch of different factors in it, and they don't know, but they know it's
Well,
probably not going to be the same timetable as it was.
well, and obviously they also mentioned too that the fact that there are clones, they can have a much faster turnaround rate of um getting troops as opposed to conscription where they have to, wait for like, people to grow up and then, train them and all that stuff. Whereas in this, the clones, they basically they don't say it in these words, but they basically mention the like accelerated aging like clones from the prequels had.
Yeah. Um, but I am interested to see how this all works out. Um, we're basically going to get another Clone Wars. Just the clones are going to be in the opposite side.
I mean, depending
If
on the way
clone,
you look at it,
if
in
if
First
hey,
Clone Wars.
if clones are fighting, oh, you were saying that. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So
Well,
anyway,
David,
what else do you have to say about
we've talked for a
Dark
while.
Force Rising?
What else do I have to say about the book? I don't know why I'm experiencing technical difficulties. What did you say?
Said, well, what else do you have to say about Dark Force Rising?
Oh, okay. So that's why it didn't make any sense because you were chopping it in and out, and I was expecting you to say, "What else do you have to say about the book?" And you said Dark Force Rising,
Hmm.
so I thought there's more to it than that. Okay, yeah. So my
Yeah.
thoughts on the book are, I mean, we kind of glossed over at the beginning, but this is a really good book.
Hmm.
I have yet to come across a Star Wars book so far that I haven't liked. But obviously, like, Timothy Zahn is a great writer. Like we said at the beginning of this podcast, he does a very good job. However, he went about planning out the Thrawn trilogy, he made a very well connected story. I'm excited to see what the next book, has to do with and how it, connects to this one and how all this wraps up. But we did kind of get into it a little bit, but there's a huge overarching story, obviously, but he has its many little stories in the book, and then each of those stories kind of converge to conclude the book. And it's a very cool thing to see
Hmm.
within reading through these books. Um
I
but not much else to say beside from that I didn't already say in the last one. The way that he writes his books, the way he captures the characters, he does a very good job of all that. And so, I don't know. It's a good book, like we said at the beginning of this podcast. If for some reason you listen to this whole thing and haven't read the book, go read the book. Go read the whole trilogy. Go ahead and get on it for next month's review of Last Command. Um, because yeah, these are some really good books, and I highly recommend them.
I'm honestly kind of looking forward to the fact that, like, how rereadable these books are gonna be because
Mm-hmm.
look, after reading Dark Force Rising, there are several things I can think of that are like, okay, he was already building this in Heir to the Empire. So after
Yeah.
we read Last Command, I might go back and reread the whole trilogy or re-listen to the whole trilogy. Obviously, I haven't been listening to them at work, but um,
Yeah.
I might go back and re-listen to the whole trilogy just to pick up on those little details he's put into this to build it
Mm-hmm.
because it really is one story. There's a lot of
Yeah.
these little details.
Yeah, I'll even say that for when we listen to the Plagueis novel, like I said, I'm listening to Deceived right now. All these different books that I've read so far, yeah, I love to listen to them multiple times. Obviously, like I'd said before, I listened to the Plagueis novel multiple times before we even decided to start talking about it. Um, and it's just one of those things where, yeah, the more time like, you listen to it the first time to get the overview of everything. And then as you go through it multiple times, like when we listen to it, when I listened to it for the podcast and preparation to discuss that, there were things that I was picking up on after having already gone through it at least 4 or 5 times before that. So it is nice to see and interesting to see, like, yeah, there's a bunch of rereadability to all these books just because of how much gets packed into them. You know, there's so much story to it that you kind of have to read it more than once to get it all.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, if you don't have anything else to say about this, why don't you go ahead and head us on into an outro?
All right, I will head us on into an outro,
Yeah, I don't
out
know
to
what
an
I was trying
intro.
I don't know what I was trying to say there. I think I almost tried to say head us on to onto an outro, but but it didn't make sense saying it twice. So and it kind of just got all like cramped
Word
together.
jumbled.
Yeah, word
Yeah,
jumbled.
yeah, I get it. I get it, David. I'm not good at English either. English is hard. But
We don't English
anyways,
good.
exactly. We need shirts. But anyways, with that, we appreciate you listening and sticking around all the way to the end of this episode. If you liked it, please leave a like on the episode. Please comment down below what you liked about it. Tell us what you didn't like about it. Tell us what we could improve about it. We are open to feedback.
No, we're not.
But with that, David's not. But with that, we will be back next Monday. Be sure to check us out as we're going to talk about something else. So, with that,
Clone
bye.
Wars Season 4.
Anyways, we're going to talk about something else.
Or,
Hope you
wait,
enjoyed.
3, 4.
Subscribe to the channel. If you made it this far, you obviously like it. Subscribe. Now leave us alone.
Great outro, Wesley. Great outro.
You interrupted me like 3 times, so I don't want to hear it. I've been asked to be left alone.